Good morning, Member of Parliament of Bundestag, MP Keith Vetter. Would like to thank you for your consent to be interviewed by us, the Institute for Policy and Strategy in Herzliya Reichman University, is the only private university in Israel. We are in Herzliya, and we are very glad to host you. It's not our first time. It's a great honor for us. And I would like to open to share with you, or that you would share with us, what is your impression of the strategic situation in the world now, especially after the international convention in Shanghai, and especially what's happening in the arena of Kiev or Ukraine vis-a-vis Russia? I'm beginning with something external to the Middle East, but it's very important.
Yeah.
And you are going to visit Ukraine, so I would like to share with you your views and impressions.
Toda Rabba. Very wise, dear Amos Gilad, dear General Gilad, and I may say, dear General Amos. It's a great honor for me, not only to listen to your question, but also to promulgate some ideas which might be provocative, but perhaps they might also give an insight from an outsider. As we see the world as it is in the moment, we see a restructuring. We see that Xi Jinping last week in China is trying to give those who are pressing the world's rule-based order a new structure. And I see this, that he is creating the Shanghai Cooperation Organization as a platform for a mutual exchange, but also to foster ties with other rogue states who are at war, like Russia and North Korea, which is supporting with 10,000s of soldiers Russia's war against Ukraine. Second, he is giving a structure because he is building a bank for money which is not dependent from the dollar. So there's a parallel system representing 40% of the world's population and 37 to 40% of the world's economy. And third, he is playing on a piano in using Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the BRICS to attract countries like India, which was present at this conference. And this is very interesting because India likes to have the appearance to be independent. But in the very week, last week, Trump gave some additional tariffs on India, 35%, and did not reach the Indian president, so that in the week where the US president offered these tariffs, huge tariffs because India is using Russian oil and gas, that India decided the following. First of all, visa liberalization for China. Second, to further purchase Russian gas and oil. And third, to participate in the Shanghai meeting. So this shows that countries which have a choice and are under pressure from the United States use this choice against the so-called West. And when we look to the United States, we in Europe, we have the feeling that Trump has given up the old tradition of transatlantic partnership, started 1916 when they entered the First World War, was fostered 1941 when Churchill called the Americans to support the rest of Europe to contain Germany. And then, since 1949, with the European Recovery Package, the Marshall Plan, to support Europe, including the nuclear umbrella. All this now is at stake. So we see that China is not waiting how Trump will behave in the future, but China is already acting. And when we go back to Trump, we see that he has rolled out a red carpet for Putin, who is looked for the International Crime Court, who is in war with Ukraine since 2014, who has divided Georgia in 2008 in 3 parts, who is sending drones also over Germany, more than 600 pieces this year, drones for reconnaissance over our critical infrastructure and military installations. So we see that Putin sees this as an appreciation, but not as an incentive to stop his war. And China sees the weakness of the West because the Europeans are waiting for United States instead of making very clear Europe has to take over more responsibility in the Mediterranean and in Eastern Europe, including Ukraine and Georgia, to give the Americans the leeway, the necessary leeway in the Indo-Pacific. And as we just have heard over the weekend, Elbridge Colby, the Deputy Defense Minister, a very influential man, has edited the first draft of the new national security strategy of the United States, which is horrifying us because he is stating that America will withdraw from its aggressive course towards Russia and China and will concentrate on the main continent. This has also huge impact on the near Middle East. And I would like to conclude here. So we Europeans now have to have a closer look on the near Middle East, and not by acknowledging a so-called Palestine state, but by acknowledging the role of Israel in the region, containing Iran, having already contained Syria or changed the system, having destroyed Hezbollah, setting Houthis under pressure, and hopefully bring the hostages back and destroy Hamas.
Thank you very much. Following your fascinating presentation, before we move to this terrible area that is called Middle East, what is your prediction about the feasibility of ending the war in Ukraine this year, next year, or at all?
Yeah. So let me really start. Normally I do the opposite with a positive scenario. Ukraine does not see why they should hand over territory. They are fighting successfully against the most aggressive army behind China of the world. And they are in this war since 11 years. They have lost hundreds of thousands of lives, but the people know if they gave up, they would become part of an imperial Russia exploiting its colonies, destroying hearts and minds and souls of children, of women, of wives, of spouses, of married couples, if they don't give in, if they don't hand over their passports, and so on. So Ukraine has the willingness, but not the capabilities so far. So if we strengthen their capabilities, it's fine. But in the European context, I see that most of them believe we could offer some forces on the ground if Ukraine is willing to hand over territory. And Russia, in the same dispute, is arguing they never would accept European or NATO troops on the Ukrainian soil. And some of us, including our chancellor, unfortunately, are stating that if there is a question of deployment of forces to Ukraine, Russia has a say on it. No, not at all. And therefore, to the positive scenario, if we support Ukraine enough, we should stipulate 2 purposes. One is to keep Ukraine in its legal borders, also if temporarily some parts of the country might remain under Russian control. Second, we have to stipulate to Russia that this imperial country has to give up its imperial idea and to learn to lose in the regard that they accept the right of existence of Ukraine, of Moldova, of the Baltic states. So our political purpose must be that Russia accepts the right of existence of its neighbor countries, like Germany does only since 1949. But we were partners in the mindset of Soviet Union and for centuries as Germans, because we never accepted the right of existence of our neighbors, neither in the West nor in the East. And so our result of the Second World War was never war again, never fascism, never National Socialism. But the sacrifices of our evil draw another conclusion. They said never defenseless. France was conquered 1870, 1914, and 1940 by Germany. So they are a nuclear power. Poland was divided 4 times with the help of Germany, and the founder nations of the League of Nations, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, were out of the map in 1945. So they did not exist. They were occupied territory. So we Germans have to accept that our sacrifices, including Israel as a Jewish state, draw the conclusion never defenseless again. And if we gave up to support Ukraine, this would create a huge mess. Nuclear proliferation, mass flight, and a blueprint for other regions. Therefore, we have to fight for the positive scenario. The negative, I would like to mention 2. First of all, in Ukraine itself, it's not very stable, because after 11 years of war and 4 years with Zelensky, people feel the unrest and the government is fatigued and corruption is taking place. It is contained, but it is worrying people, and it is exploited by cognitive warfare of Russia. So one negative scenario could be that inside Ukraine, evil forces say the others have neglected us. We create a modern North Korea. We start with a dirty bomb from Chernobyl, and later on we develop something that nobody can attack us. We are a kind of modern porcupine, a kind of modern Central European North Korea. Nobody would like this. A more likely negative scenario is that the European member states feel weak, do not trust in the United States, but do not also not trust in themselves to say we have to self-invigorate us, we have to empower us, we have to stand in for a free Europe in peace, freedom, and self-determination, including Ukraine as being part of European Union and European NATO. But if they don't pursue this, then Ukraine will give up territory, and Russia will do the following. It will cut off all lines of communication to the Black Sea, so that we have an decapitated West Ukraine and a Russian border, which is including the whole Black Sea to the borders of Bulgaria and Romania. And Ukraine is then very dependent. This would lead to mass flight. We calculate with 10 to 15 million people, even more, out of the 30 million inhabitants. And we calculate that Putin then refreshes his troops, uses Ukrainian knowledge, also military knowledge, is abusing them, because they always let fight people from occupied territory, Chechnya, Dagestan, and other areas. So that in the next 2 years, as long as the western part of Europe is weak, they start with Moldova, or they start aggressing with non-military means the Baltic states, so that the war will continue. And therefore, these 2 scenarios show we cannot accept a North Korean type, and we cannot accept that Russia is continuously exploiting our weakness. But the most likely scenario is the latter one, that Ukraine is breaking into pieces or is forced into an armistice, which will be tested by Russia. So anyway, either we invest in much more money and armaments investment, or we take over deployment of troops, take over air defense, or what would be very simple, to defreeze the frozen Russian assets in Europe, 230 billion euros, give it to Ukraine, stop the shadow fleet in the Baltic Sea, so that they cannot bring back foreign currencies to Russia by selling oil and gas. And third, to take over air defense with the coalition of the willing, as offered by Estonia.
Fascinating. Moving quickly to the Middle East. How can you characterize our strategic relations between Federal Republic of Germany and State of Israel now? And what is needed to be done in order to upgrade and enhance and cement our relations that seems to me mutual interest?
Yeah. I believe the first and most important demand of both of us must be independent who is governing our countries. Our friendship and reliability must be unbreakable. Having said that, we in Germany are quite concerned, also in my quite moderate party, about the conduct of the current government, especially with regard to the parties outside Likud. And we have questions about the priorities to free the hostages and to destroy Hezbollah and Hamas and Houthis and change in Syria and contain Iran is really marvelous. It's overwhelming, but it is also forcing your society to keep cohesion. And the question to do everything, or the decision to do everything in parallel, is very costly. Costly in the Israeli society, but also costly in the relationship. In Europe, Israel is quite isolated, except for Hungary, except for Germany, and some other countries also in the Baltic. I just was on a conference in Copenhagen with other parliamentarians from all European Union member states. Sorry, excuse me. And when I listened to Ireland or Italy or Spain, I really was concerned. Therefore, I believe we have to talk not bluntly, but very clear that friendship must also be durable during hard times. And in Germany, there's increasing pressure from the outside, from UK and France, to raise sanctions against Israel. This was the reason why our chancellor stopped, that means continued the already existing stop to deliver weapons. And the pressure inside our country, where Palestine people have occupied the media and the mindset of the woke and left part of our society. So we have to be very careful because it is exploited. And we, some colleagues of me and we have made different proposals. And I would like to be very frank, also if it might be criticized. We have offered, for example, to continue to deliver weapons, or to start again to deliver weapons, better to say, also gearboxes. It's very important, the gearboxes. I believe that's much more important, the gearboxes for tanks, than any other weapon, because you don't need German weapons. But this is, I believe, of utmost importance. But then we should align with the 15 Arab countries who are supporting to de-weaponize Hamas. And we should ask them also to acknowledge completely the right of existence of Israel. Second, we should increase the pressure on Turkey to free the hostages of the Hamas, so that Turkey is increasing its pressure to the Hamas. Because we have given some help to Ukraine in supporting the United Kingdom to deliver Typhoon fighter aircrafts, Eurofighters, which is very important. So we should use this leverage to Turkey. Fourth, the settlement policy. We really should urge Israel to reconsider its settlement policies and the uncontrolled behavior of some groups of the settlers, which is really damaging any potential outcome for further cooperation with some Palestine authorities. If we want that after Abbas, a moderate Palestine leadership is in the West Jordan land, we should give them the chance to vote a moderate leadership. And then the sixth proposal was the snapback mechanism. I worked on it for more than 2 years, and I'm very happy that last week the snapback mechanism against Iran was called out. But all in all, I have mentioned some conditions we could do. Also, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich to be sanctioned regarding some trips and some trips to Europe. They will not travel to Europe, but it would be a symbolic mean to not give them the permission for a certain time to travel to Europe. This would be signals to the moderates in the Israeli society that we don't want to contain Israel, that we don't want to press Israel, but that we want to enforce, encourage, empower the moderate, smart part of Israel, the Zionist part, who is knowing that priorities sometimes are helpful regarding to capabilities, and that one priority should also be to have friends after the end of the war. And I believe we now have to think about the post-war scenario. Look to the successes. Iran, years away from the nuclear bomb. Unfortunately, it was a 12 days war and not a fortnight or a 3 weeks war, because we had no chance to encourage the Iranian society for an upheaval against the government, because they were waiting, and after the end they were very reluctant to show presence. But we gained time, which must be used. Look to Syria. We have to be very careful, because there's a former terrorist in the government, but he is trying to incorporate more. And we see that Lebanon itself, the Lebanese government, is in favor of getting rid of Hezbollah. So we still only, in inverted commas, we have the Houthi, but we still have living hostages and bodies in the hands of Hamas. So in the end, Germans need to understand that only with total cruelties and total war, the fascism, the National Socialism was overcome in Germany. Only unconditional surrender made us free, more or less, from National Socialist ideology. So we have to understand that also the pressure on our population, millions killed by Allied bomber fleets, that also this led to decapitate us from the horror of the fascists. And they still are present in our society, but mostly contained. So if we understand this, then we should also understand that we cannot accept Hamas at the negotiation table. Either Hamas is deleted and has an unconditional surrender, or there are ways to bring them out of the country elsewhere, to Russia or elsewhere. But we cannot accept Hamas as a negotiating partner. Why? Because Hamas is not accepting the right of existence of Israel. And therefore, it's a big mistake to request from France, UK, and others to accept a Palestine state. Who is this? We should increase the pressure on the Arab neighbor states to integrate 5 million Palestine refugees in their own societies as Lebanese people, Syrian people, Jordan people, some in Egypt, and the rest of 2 million, 2.5 million Palestine people. Okay, then we could have a look, but we should give up this horrible UNRWA status of heritage of Palestine people. Germany, for God's sake, did not give a heritage status to people from Silesia, from East Prussia, from Bessarabia, from Hungary, and so on. So I believe we have a romanticized view on the two-state solution, and we have a very one-sided view on Israel, which is completely wrong. And I hope I have given you a balanced approach and assessment of the situation as I see it, probably in parts wrong, but that's the state of the current debate also in Germany.
Specific question about Iran. What is your assessment about the feasibility that Iran will ever give up the nuclear, the vicious nature, unless they will collapse? That's my opinion. I mean, what is your opinion about Iran? Because the snapback you have just mentioned, what we need to do in order to prevent this threat forever? not only against Israelis, vis-a-vis the whole Middle East.
General Amos, this is the key question, and it is directly linked with Ukraine. If Ukraine is failing, it has an impact. Why? For our listeners, in 1991, Ukraine became again independent. In 1994, by the pressure of Germany and the United States and some others, they handed over their nuclear weapons to the successor of the Soviet Union, to Russia. And to convince them to do this, they became security guarantees via the Budapest Memorandum from 1994. So the guarantor powers were Russia, UK, and the United States. And in 2008, when the Membership Action Plan was, Germany and France vetoed a Membership Action Plan for Ukraine. In 2014, Crimea was occupied and the war started in eastern Ukraine. Germany and France vetoed a double approach, negotiations, as they did, and to weaponize and train Ukraine. So the conclusion for Ukraine is, don't rely on those papers. And those papers like the Budapest Memorandum. So this is the lesson identified and learned for North Korea becoming a nuclear power, not believing in international agreements. And it's the lesson learned of Iran, because they were supported by United States, Iraq was supported by the United States, then United States changed, they supported the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, and then they fought against them. So there is no reliability except on your own. And therefore, the conclusion for Iran is never give up the nuclear idea. So also if we lose time, we have a 5,000-year-old history, we will strive for it. And if Ukraine is failing and Iran is going nuclear, also Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, potentially Qatar, but in any way, Turkey will become nuclear. And this cannot be in the interest of Israel, but also not of Germany, because then Turkey doesn't need the European Union and NATO any longer, and we have a problem in our eastern flank. But for the rules in the region, Israel is the only functioning democracy in the region, and it is weaponized for due reasons. And if there is a nuclear arms race in the region, we also have to think how to better support Israel in this context. Because there's mistrust, and all the approaches of Abraham Accords and anything else would then be overlaid, overburdened by the nuclear questions. Also regarding the money, Egypt will become a nuclear power, but they don't have the capabilities. So they will absorb huge amounts of money which are used for education, for training, for migration, for agriculture, and so never trust Iran with this system. And therefore I mentioned that the war ended too early, my personal opinion, because it was not possible to inflame or to engage the Iranian population. But perhaps you have a better insight and a better idea on that.
Specific question about Turkey. What we need to do with it? What is your assessment or perspective?
Yeah.
This is a special case, I call them.
Yeah. Turkey is really owning different layers. It's the former colonial power of the region of the Near Middle East, Ottoman Empire. It is a country which is owning the Treaty of Montreux regarding disarmament in the Black Sea. This country fought for centuries against UK and Russia for the ownership of the Black Sea and the Crimea. So in the moment, Erdogan is in between. He is supporting Ukraine, but he is also offering Putin a framework for negotiations. And this is like a chameleon, a very shiny or a very difficult position. And we Europeans are responsible for that. In 2004, when we opened the European Union for Cyprus, for Bulgaria and Romania for political reasons, those three countries were much more corrupt and inept for a European Union membership than Turkey. And all knew that. But at that time, the arguments in the European Union were, okay, the European Union is a Christian organization and it's an agricultural organization. Turkey is not, in the vast majority, not Christian, and it's a very agricultural country. They will disturb our agricultural market. So they worked from Angela Merkel, a proposal, a privileged partnership. But this was lip service. It didn't help. And since 2004, Turkey changed from a more or less benign power oriented to the West to a very split power. Half of the population wants to go to the European Union. The other one would others. Then Turkey has received, still has, nearly 3 million refugees from Syria and a huge number of refugees from Afghanistan and so on. So they keep them, and it's a pound, it's a weight to influence Europe, to press Europe for better conditions. So far, they don't have done this, but they have already received 12 billion euros to mitigate their costs regarding the refugees. So what should we do? First of all, we have to resolve the challenges with Cyprus, northern Cyprus, occupied by Turkey, Turkey and Greece. Because if this deadlock is overcome, then European Union and NATO could cooperate better. There is a Berlin Plus agreement where the European Union can completely use the military acquis and military capabilities of NATO, led by the Deputy of Secure, a British or a German four-star general. If we achieve that, then we have a lot of solutions for the future and also for our own deterrence. But this is not the case. And therefore, we should look for 28 plus. If Erdogan behaves like a Democrat, he will not strive for the presidency in 28. So we have to look for the moderate forces, and we have to be benign to the Turkish people, that they see it's an advantage to cooperate with Europe, with the European Union, with economy, anything else. What we should do is a tit for tat with Turkey. We give you leeway in armament support, but then you stop pressing Israel and you stop supporting Hamas, and you withdraw to support terrorist organizations. I know this is very difficult, and the whole officers' corps and police corps is completely exchanged. The leading figures are completely oriented to Erdogan, but we have to do some incentives. If not, then Turkey will orient itself to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, could become member of BRICS, and would then be a hamper stone and not a brick in the wall of NATO.
I would like to have your remarks or observation about the Abraham Accords, the feasibility to expand them to Saudi Arabia, the importance of it, and the role of Egypt, that is so important, as the first signed peace treaty with Israel, and the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, that traditionally Germany is supporting them.
The Abraham Accords could be a key to acknowledge Israel, but also to make the Arab countries more responsible among themselves, so that they see there is an advantage in cooperation. Look to the Maghreb countries, Mauritania, Algeria, Morocco, and Libya do not cooperate amongst each other. They cooperate much more bilaterally with some European states, but not amongst each others. Egypt is supporting the split of Libya, and Russia has increased its presence in Libya, and now 10,000s of additional migrants strive to European Union. First line is then Crete and Greece. So it is very helpful to better take care of Egypt. I have a personal experience with the Munich Security Conference. We visited in 2019, Egypt and Qatar. In Qatar, we met El Zarif, the foreign minister from Iran. But in Egypt, we met al-Sisi. And al-Sisi said, "You are black-eyed. You don't see the reality in Egypt. Every year I have 2 million births, but only 700 to 800,000 employments. So take over every year 1 million from me, and then you have a stable Egypt. You won't do that? Well, then you have to accept my methods." And this was in 2019. And today, at least in Germany, we have completely neglected to better cooperate with the region because we are occupied with the cooperation with the United States, with Ukraine, and so on. I believe Russia already has filled this gap, and Europe has withdrawn from Northern Africa. France, Germany are not engaged anymore militarily. We have to accept and have nothing done against it. The huge, horrifying massacres and refugee crisis in Sudan. So there is a process inside Northern Africa where we don't know the outcome. Destabilizing Libya, destabilizing probably also Egypt, the challenge of the Renaissance stem in Ethiopia. On the other side, Saudi Arabia has a very modern leadership, but a very conservative church, religion, and a very conservative population. So if this leadership is not overcoming the difference between, or the mind gap between leadership and population, it's then an unstable country. And all in all, we see the challenges of the climate change, Bahrain lacking of water, Saudi Arabia lacking of water. So this can be done for some decades, but in 2 or 3 decades, there will be a real challenge which we have, where we don't have any solutions today. But Israel, as far as I know, is now achieving something where other Arab countries are ready then to invest. I have heard, correct me if I'm wrong, that if Israel has achieved that what is on the agenda in Lebanon and in Gaza, then foreign investors from the Gulf, not only from Saudi Arabia, will help to build up a new region. And I believe that we Europeans can bring in our knowledge, but not better knowledge, but better knowers, not as better knowers, but that the solutions must come out of the region. Where we can look for is that all these countries see an incentive and advantage to accept and support the right of existence of Israel. But this is very visionary.
I would like to conclude. We can talk forever, by the way. I would like to conclude by asking you, what is your vision about the horizon of the strategic relations, unique relations, special relations between Israel and Germany?
Well, my personal conviction is we should think to include Israel's knowledge, wisdom, and capabilities in a common European Mediterranean security agreement. I am dreaming of a widening of a European NATO where Israel is a genuine part of it. I know that this in Israel is seen as very romantic because of the lack of capabilities and the differences inside Europe, but we have to work on a new European mindset and strategic culture to accept that security is first for welfare, for economic development, for societal cohesion. And in this security context, I believe that Israel must be part of it. But then we have to resolve the challenges with Turkey, and the Arab countries have to accept that Palestine people are genuine citizens of their countries. But when you talk of a vision, it's not a plan. So therefore, my apologies. that I don't have a plan, but I have a vision. And then let's work for this vision or to debate better solutions.
Would like to, MP Kisvetter, would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for this illuminating and fascinating and educating views and strategic views and fantastic presentation. Vielen Dank. Thank you very much. Auf Wiedersehen. And we will meet again, of course.
Thank you for the great honor. Toda Rabba, and I hope to see you again.
Vielen Dank.
Dankeschön.